What's interesting about this question that you delved into is that on one level, it speaks to a change ideologically that is taking place in the Democratic Party. But on another level, like, these are the arguments that, that even like Marcos Melitzis was having with the Democratic Party 10, 12 years ago, 14 years ago, that, I mean, the notion, and Melitzis, I would put, ideologically not necessarily on the vanguard of the far left, but the critique of the Democratic Party, the critique of the way that of media buying fees, about the structures. That is like a 15-year-old critique. It just seems like it's getting more exposed now, in part because the Democratic Party has been so decimated on these races, but also I think because there's also an ideological perspective on this as well.
Right, and there's a lot more young people. Millennials is a bigger generation, and they're moving into politics, and they're much more interested in the idea of backing an individual candidate who they believe in than they are supporting an institution. So partly, it's coming at the same time that you're seeing that trend unfold. But you're right. I think technology has something to do with it too. When the blogosphere was driving the Ned Lamont surge, that was an important element. But without social media the way it exists now, it was much more difficult to move it. So now these insurgent candidates have a sophisticated understanding of how to use email and also social media, which enables them to get their message out in a way that was more difficult 10 or 15 years ago. And then you have the base that's more receptive to it.
It's interesting, there was a response in the Intercept to your piece by Paul Perry, who ran in Pennsylvania's 7th District. I guess he just dropped out in this 2018 cycle. And there was one line he had in there, like, this is how we train our leaders in this country, talking about the meetings that he had to go to sort of like, to appeal to the DCCC. And the more that there's other incentives, the more Tim DeGarris's, the more Justice Democrats, the more of these, People's House projects, whatever it is, grow up around the DCCC, all of it changes on some level.
Yeah, that's right, and particularly if they win, you have to win,
right?
And we'll see. The fourth quarter of 2017 was awfully interesting. Maybe 8 or 9 these insurgent candidates outraised establishment opponents. They don't just have to outraise them, though. They also have to beat them. But if you're winning the fundraising race with small dollars, that's a good sign that you have a good chance of winning, because those are, if somebody gave you money, they're probably going to go out and vote for you, and they're probably going to tell their friends to go out and vote for you, and they're more likely to go knock on doors. And in these primaries, you might have 20 or 30,000 people vote total in a Democratic primary. So, just bringing out 15, 20,000 of your supporters gets you that win. But the left needs to win them. If it's just a bunch of smoke and fire on Twitter and Facebook, and then the candidates end up losing in the primaries, then the system that exists will continue to perpetuate itself. So look, Angie Gregg won, but although I think she will win, but there are many others that I think will lose.
It's also interesting, too, because you made the point in 2006 that Rahm Emanuel got credit for a lot of wins that were a function of a wave. And I remember that election very, very well. there was a lot of factors going on. It wasn't just the anti-Iraq war sentiment. It was also literally like corruption to the level where they were protecting, what was a guy who was perceived as being a child sex predator. Like they were actively protecting it.
Right.
I'm not talking about Denny Hastert, who they also apparently, now we have a better sense of what was going on maybe. But Rahm Emanuel got a lot of credit for that. And on closer inspection, he didn't deserve it. In fact, he lost races probably that we could have won. And in this instance, though, it cuts the other way. If the left can win these primaries and then take advantage of the wave, then there's going to be a lot of credit there. And lastly, and I know you got to go, but just talk a little bit about Michael Portzor. He's the political director from the AFL-CIO, and he has a theory about what's going to be happening with elections going forward and how the Democratic Party should reorient itself in terms of perceiving what you want to do, like the building of long-term majorities versus the building of long-term policy wins.
Right. The idea is to think about politics as a means toward making people's lives better, which is kind of a radical shift in Washington. But the idea is that with so much anger out there about inequality and everything else that has fueled wave after wave starting in 2006 and then culminating with the election of Donald Trump, the idea is that the old goal of a permanent majority, and by permanent you might mean 10 or 20 or 30 years, should no longer be the goal because it's just simply not attainable. Nobody's gonna have a 20-year majority in a country where people are furious about everything. No matter how good you are, you're gonna get tossed out. So the idea then is that when you get into office, you should be ready to implement and execute on in a very bold agenda that's going to be popular in the sense that it can't be undone when you're wiped out 2 years later. And you have 4 years because if you have the White House, then you can block the new majority from undoing what you did. The two models would be the tax cuts that the Republicans just jammed through. They may lose the House, but they're going to be able to hold on to those tax cuts at least as long as Trump is president, and probably they'll hold on to a significant portion of it for longer than that. And even Obamacare, they've been able to knock out the less popular parts of it, the taxes, the mandates. But even running for 7 years and the idea that they're going to repeal Obamacare, they couldn't get rid of it because there are concrete benefits that people feel. So the idea is get a progressive Democratic majority in there that makes big steps forward, and then be prepared to get wiped out because people are angry. But when you get wiped out, you will have, let's say, you put in place Medicare for all, you did a free college, or whatever you did. You're going to be able to defend it from the minority because it's so popular. And then when you get back into power, be ready to advance it further. So that's his idea of how to think differently about what's possible with legislative majorities than just simply saying, okay, well, let's figure out a way that we can just have a permanent majority.